Welcome to the Urban Income Podcast, where we talk to prominent minorities in leadership positions and discuss their personal journey toward success. I'm your host, Laval Chichester, the CEO of Growth Skills and Urban Income. And on today's episode, we have Kristy LoRusso, the Chief Marketing Officer of Kaiser Permanete. Kaiser Permanete is a multi-billion-dollar healthcare company, and Kristy has done an incredible job guiding them through the COVID-19 pandemic and more. Hope you enjoy this episode. Kristy, state your name and occupation, and let's get started.
Kristy LoRusso. I am Senior Vice President, National Chief Marketing Officer for Kaiser Permanete. I identify as female. I was born and raised in Connecticut. And over the last 3 decades, I have lived in New York, Los Angeles, and the San Francisco Bay Area. I reside in a suburb of Oakland, California today with my family. I'm American. I'm born in the U.S., as are my parents, but my ancestors are from Italy, Ireland, and England.
Kaiser started in a place of equality. And so, like your whole business is built on that. But throughout, you haven't always worked at Kaiser. But throughout your career, has any of these things impacted your work?
Absolutely. Every one of these things. So I would start with, so my dad was first generation American. His parents were immigrants from Italy, and they came here. And my grandfather was a caretaker on this estate. It's a very wealthy family in Connecticut, the Smiths. And just from an early age, I learned work ethic. That you put in the hard work. You show up with integrity. You show up with honesty. You show up with confidence, and good things happen. And you're always kind to people, because you never know what people are going through. And if you ask them, you actually might learn a whole bunch of things. But I feel like that's been really important in my life. And then I've had some setbacks through my family, financial circumstances, health circumstances, and in that, I think it's really built, made me more resilient. And also, I have this, I say, can't equals will for me. So when you tell me I can't do something, it makes me, okay, I'm going to go do it. And so I think that really is part of my history and my family. And whenever anyone told me I couldn't do something, it just motivated me to try harder.
That's amazing. And so there's a couple things in there that I want to ask. So coming up, I think I've been told directly by many people that I'm too soft, right? So I'm too nice, and you have to be like, an a-hole and mean to sort of get ahead. And Raul said that exact opposite. He said that, being nice and kind really has taken him so far. And you just said the same thing. So can you unpack that a little bit?
I'll go back in my career, particularly knowing, the audience who might be, listening to this or reading this. Early on in my career, and it was in New York City, and being a young female trying to break into the world of just getting a job in New York. You had to be tough. You had to be a bit of a jerk. You had to stand up for yourself. You had to be aggressive, and advocate for yourself in order to break down the barriers and be heard and be seen.
Mm-hmm.
I think over time, as I've established myself and built relationships and leveraged those relationships and learned how to ask for help, what I have learned is kindness gets you a lot farther, because particularly in this context of this environment in which we're operating, right? Everything's so politicized. Everything is just so angry, and the world is really hard. We have to help each other. And I think we have to be kinder to each other and be thoughtful about people's experiences,
right?
And not jump to assumptions.
Absolutely. When we started, you said that you got the CMO role. Congratulations at Kaiser. And I watched you, I got to work with you for many years, and I watched you when we started working together. You weren't CMO. And so I watched your ascent. And when you just said you got it in COVID, it's like the hardest job. First of all, the hardest job in the world. Like a CMO is not a fun role. I've been a CMO, and God bless you. And for COVID though, like, so you've got this massive responsibility because you're in healthcare, and then you get handed like a deck of cards. Like no one has ever experienced something like COVID. So how do you even function first?
And let me add one more change. Yeah, and there's one more change of all. So it's this crazy big role. It's during a pandemic and a new CEO.
Oh wow! Okay, wow. Yikes! Man,
so good luck.
If I had an ounce of your courage, geez.
Good luck.
Yeah, absolutely. So, past 5 years, what are you most proud of? You're doing amazing. So, what happened? Like, how do you like thrive in that environment?
I am so proud to work for an organization that put our members first, and for the frontline workers and care delivery partners and physicians and nurses and everyone who risk their lives every day to care for others. I just, to represent an organization like that is just humbling and incredible. One of the things I'm most proud of is how we mobilized so quickly and ripped down silos and change process and said, no, we're going to work differently together in order to do right by our members and our communities, to get people vaccinated, to get people informed. So that was really incredible work. Relative to marketing, we under my leadership, we had 3 public health response. It was about healthy behaviors, and it was about hope. And so it was really taking like this emotional connection, this hope for the future, the hope for tomorrow, but and then intertwining it with healthy behaviors, how to stay healthy and really get the message out there, because we're a brand that people trust. We also did a lot of work with minority and vulnerable communities that were, exponentially getting sicker than everybody else, and working with minority-owned agencies to find and reach populations that we normally wouldn't be able to in new and different and unique ways. So just amazing amounts of work.
That's incredible. And I think, to your point, the minority groups got hit the hardest on, and they're also on the poverty side. If you look at some of the stats from the census and all of those that we have on the site, and the motivating factor to actually build urban income. And so I think that also this stuff naturally ladders up to Thrive. Like Kaiser, what you was always hopeful, right? Even when there was no COVID, you're always pushing hope and healthy behaviors. And I guess what is new is like washing of hands, like those types of behaviors. Is that what's
it was distancing, washing your hands, all of those things, right? But then putting in the context of the things you're going to be able to do, right? So you're not able to have dinner together right now, but think about when you can. If you do these things, you can get back to that. Also helping educate and beat misinformation that was out there. I mean, people were scared of the vaccine and didn't want to get it for all the reasons I totally understand. So it was our role to help, myth bust and educate and support and build confidence, so that we could protect people.
Got it. So going back to gender, you're a woman in CMO of a massive organization. How and throughout your career, have you had any microaggressions or anything like that? And what would you how would you guide someone like you, young women, females, or anyone who's sort of different to navigate those situations, especially from a positive standpoint, right? We want to arm our readers and the people to know that despite what's happening, there's what are the positives that you could do to continue to thrive?
Yeah, I had some fun ones early on in my career. I used to get the well, you're awfully young for the position that you have, or people went as far as like called me kid. I mean,
Oh, wow.
just kind of missing the tap on the head is really what was. There was the boy, you're analytical for a female.
Wow.
That was another good one. And then early on in my career, the only roles that I was sent that came my way through a headhunter I was working with were like the more traditional female roles, so more administrative roles, more of the creative roles. And I was like, well, I actually have an operations and analytical background. And they're like, oh, but you'll be better off so trying to steer me,
Wow.
To another way. So what I would say is what I did is I demonstrated why I was as qualified as the next person. Just is perseverance, stuck with it, stick to itness, and not backing down. And also leveraging my relationships with people that I knew could help open doors and influence along the way too. I mean, I think you can't be afraid to ask for help because you can't do anything in this world. So the earlier you can build alliances and networks, and then use those people to help you when you need it most, and give back too, of course. It's not a one-way street. The more doors that can open for you.
Absolutely. And so I think someone listening to this and going through some of these situations, as uncomfortable as they are, there's a bit of fear, a lot of fear, and this stuff hurts, right? Me personally, I've gone through some of these things. In some scenarios, it wasn't good enough that I was 40 under 40. It was like, why is he here? And like, you always hear side whispers, and so how. And I remember early in my career, I had a lot of sort of fear. How do you build because is there a practice, or do you have some sort of advice to sort of help people believe in themselves and double down and control that fear? Because it's fear is going to naturally be there, but when there's pressure on top of that fear, because you're a woman, you're Black, or whatever, what sort of advice do you have there?
The whole imposter syndrome thing is so real. And I struggle with it. There's, on a daily basis. I think the best advice I would say is, don't embrace it, acknowledge it, be okay with it. And then I do a lot of positive self-talk. I have an app that pushes me positive affirmations 4 times a day.
That's amazing.
That I say out loud. I surround myself with people that actually balance out, particularly in a leadership position, balance out my weaknesses. So I'm really clear on my strengths, and I know the things that I'm not great at. So I hire people to offset the things that I know are not, either I don't love or I'm not great at, to be able to demonstrate, leadership and my ability to deliver. And it can't, you also can't do anything alone. Again, I said that once already, but I think that's being able to rely on other people and get your confidence from others is important too.
Absolutely. So I'm going to distill that. So positive self-talk, right? And that's, you see athletes, any successful person I've heard, that's what they say, right? And it's a practice I do for myself. And the way I think is like, if you're not going to talk good to yourself and encourage yourself, no one else will, right? So I love that. I love the tip of having that affirmations pushed to you. That's very, that's a really good way of using technology to reinforce this, because you will forget, as busy as some people are. Leveraging your network and being positive, I think that's really, really good. And asking for help, I think that's incredible. And I think what you also spoke on is that vulnerability of and I found this out in my career too. You're not going to be good at everything, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
I think the sooner you're honest with that, you're able to sort of to be able to identify, those areas of actual growth and teamwork that you could thrive on. So that's incredible.
I find that people who are earlier in their careers are more comfortable collaborating because I think it's more available, like in the school system and the way that the education system has been evolving, public or private or however you get your education. The notion of collaboration was non-existent when I went to school, but I'm finding early in career employees are actually so valuable because they're comfortable in that space.
How can other genders be allies to women specifically?
I'm really fortunate. I work in an industry that is very well balanced, male and female, and the men that I work with are allies. I think it's because we're a mission-based organization and everyone is really supportive. And when I think about outside of my career in healthcare, the men that were allies to me were very good listeners, very good advocates, and supporters of me and my work.
Mm-hmm.
And they told me the truth. Like they were people that I could ask questions to, because it's so weird. Like there's certain things that, like, I would say a guy would never say this, right? Like a guy would never worry about this, right? And they were like, yeah, I'm not sure why you're so worried about this. I'm like, it's because I'm a woman. And they're like, well, you got to change that. And so like they would role play. I have mentors that are men that are role play with me.
That's I'm learning a lot, because that's my wife tells me stuff like a man like just exactly what you just said. Like a man we don't think that way, and we don't know. We just don't know, right? So I think listening is key, like you said, and that role playing thing I think is that's interesting. That's very helpful.
I have certain mentors I can reach out to and say, hey, I'm thinking about this, and they'll say, and I'll say, is this even something that would even cross your mind? They're like, no, I would have just gone and done it. Like, why even asking about that? Go do it. And I was like, thank you. Okay, that's good. I will.
That's amazing. Switching over to the topic of money, right? So career is very impactful with money. When you think about your income, like what do you wish you would have done with your money sooner? And what advice do you have from, let's say the intern fresh out of college? What advice do you have for people?
Actually, three things come to mind. When I was I paid for college. I put myself through school, and I got a lot of student debt, and I was determined to pay it off immediately. So I was very disciplined about budgeting my money, my very small salary, and made sure that I was paying off my student loans. So I think being really disciplined about the money you do earn and being thoughtful about where you put it. Start your 401k or whatever company investment you can, even if it's just a little bit of money, get that started early, because the earlier you start it, the longer, the payoff will be. The only regret I have when it comes to money is when I lived in LA, I had an apartment in Santa Monica, and I had enough money to put a down payment on a house or an apartment. I didn't do it in Santa Monica. I did it in the Valley. That market in Santa Monica is like, gone off the charts. So that probably would have been a good investment I could have made.
You live and you learn, as they say.
Yeah.
Do you think that the skills that you just said, everything you said about managing your money, being diligent, you set a goal, pay off that debt, do those skills translate to your career? Like, do they actually help you in your job?
Yeah, actually, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, absolutely. I'm disciplined by nature in that way, but yeah, I do think about, like, where are we headed? How are we going to get there? What's it going to take? And that discipline of like always staying a couple steps ahead and being goal oriented. And, if you slip back and you don't quite make it, that's okay, because we're in continuous learning mode, and that's all right. But yeah, that has translated in my work.
That's awesome. You really inspire tremendous loyalty and love from the people that work with you, right? I've had candid conversations with your employees about you, and they just love you. So let me just go right there. How you, and you have a big org, right? How are you inspiring that sort of love and loyalty and willingness to do the best work possible in your org?
So being CMO 3 days into the pandemic, one of the things I was very conscientious about was reaching people, because suddenly we're all remote. And so I was really diligent about being present. So I started blogging. I started hosting short town halls with videos so people could see me. I was reaching out with people personally to check in. I really like dissent, so I like to surround myself with people that don't agree with me, and that's pretty uncomfortable at first. But once you get to know me, you're like, okay, she really wants to hear what we think is wrong with the idea, because that really garners, that gets to the best result. And I'm willing to be vulnerable. I'm willing to tell stories. I'm willing to share my mistakes. I'm willing to share my growth. And I think in that vulnerability represents authenticity. You can't fake authenticity. Like, you either are or you aren't. It's kind of like being funny. Like, don't tell me you're funny. Show me you're funny.
Yes.
So I think it's how I show up, and I try and show up, you get me as you get me, like, whether I'm talking to the CEO or I'm talking to an early employee, I'm just me. And I try and stay true to that.
And you're bringing your full self, as they would say, to work, and you leave room for that for your people. I think that's incredible.
I think that's important.
Yeah, I think you take it for granted that the whole, you like dissent, and another way of putting that is like, people, I've heard someone say, like, I like challengers. We need a challenger organization. But it was, it's the opposite of that. If you challenged, you got fired, so so it's wonderful to see that, you that's one thing you speak, but you live it too, right? And you said it's uncomfortable to build that sort of organization, but it's essential. And I think you're right, and you prove it. You get better outcomes that way, and I think you really establish trust, is what I've just seen. It's a great work. That's just incredible. What advice would you give someone looking to break into healthcare specifically?
So a couple things. Definitely, do your research, because healthcare is an incredible industry, and it's very mission based. So you don't come to healthcare to be a millionaire. Like, you come because you want to do right by people, and the salaries are there and you're well paid, but it's like, it's not this boon of money, but it's really rewarding. I would say talk to as many people as you can. Use social media with purpose. Definitely do your research. Try and find people. Have your story, because people in healthcare really want to know why you want to come into healthcare. I remember in one of my interviews, because I had done subscription marketing and tech marketing, and they were sort of like, you're not selling widgets here. You're actually like, you're doing something very meaningful.
You're right.
So why do you even want to come here? So you better have a really good story as to why you want to break into healthcare. And then definitely talk to people. People in healthcare are very open to networking and communicating and helping you. But be really intentional about how you use people's time.
Do you think there are skills or character traits like empathy that lean towards this industry versus another?
I think, empathy for sure. Wanting to do good, wanting to make a difference, wanting to better people's lives, willing to take on hard things like, social inequity and health inequities, and being willing to hold up the mirror and have hard conversations about how not only you're showing up as a person, but the organization is, that you're representing.
Absolutely. If someone wanted to, like, they heard this, or like, Kristy's amazing, I want to work with her or be a mentee, how would they be able, is that a possibility, and if so, how would they be able to do that?
I mentor a lot of people. I get a lot out of it. I love it. So people can find me on LinkedIn. My only request is, because, I have my time, I have limited time, is if you reach out, have a really strong agenda as far as, what you want to get out of the relationship and what you need from me. And I'm happy to engage.
That's amazing. How have you accomplished all that you have, and how do you plan on accomplishing the goals that you have set out for you?
Well, I'm going to go back to, building and being intentional about building and leveraging relationships. So I think that's been huge in my career. Delivering results, obviously, being able to demonstrate results. But I think more importantly, I have found that I'm really good at building teams and finding people that are individually and collectively really strong. And as a leader, I love leading like really strong teams and building them. And so I feel like that's been a really important part of my career. I've also, I'm not afraid to take risks. I'm usually the person that raises their hand to, when they're like, who wants to do this? And everyone like scatters. I'm like, I'll do it.
Yeah, I love your fearlessness. That's amazing. What advice would you give to your younger self?
I think I would give advice to going back to like where we started on the being kindness and actually being curious. So don't I think I made a lot of assumptions. And because I was young and naive, I think it's don't make so many assumptions, ask more questions, be more curious, get to know the person, get to know the company, get to know their value and your value, and find the points of commonality as soon as you can, because that's where the magic happens. And I think I would have liked to have been more curious. From a professional standpoint, I think it's really important to think of the world as a jungle gym and not a ladder, that it's okay and you should bounce around and do different things until you find your thing. And even when you find your thing, going up is not always the answer. Going side to side and in and out is actually really interesting. And wonderful careers are built that way.
I don't think anyone has I've never heard that in my career. That's really, really great advice from, like, I'm sort of experiencing a little bit of that. And that's incredible. That's really good advice. Yeah, wow. When's your book coming out? Like, I would love to read your story. And I think especially, like, for real, I think people, the talk is cheap. And I think you nailed it when you said, you just show, so you are authentic. And just like, I just admire the loyalty and your teams. It's not like, it's one thing to build teams, but the loyalty that you get from your team is incredible. And that, I think you need to teach the world, because there's a bunch of people out there writing books and it's all fake. And I think like your story and your book would be well received by the world, especially like through the COVID journey, like what that is not easy, like what you just said, and new CEO leadership. So kudos to you.
Help me with my TED Talk, Laval.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. So this is Urban Income. So let's I want to leave it at this. Throughout your career, what are some side hustles that you use to generate extra income?
Currently, it's basic, investments and things like that. But leading up to this, oh gosh, I started a babysitting business when I was 10. I look at a 10-year-old, I'm like, who let me hold their baby?
Amazing.
I had a babysitting hustle.
What?
I mowed lawns, I built fences, I did construction, I worked in retail. I had just a lot of things. Mm-hmm. I think what I think about Now it's more about, giving back and advising and doing more not-for-profit. But I was scrappy. No one paid for me to go to school. I had to put myself through college. So I would do anything to figure out how to pull dollars together. And there was sort of like no job was beneath me in order to, do what I had to do. Because I had going back to my setting the goal, like I had my eye on the prize. Like I was going to go to college. I was going to go to New York City. Nobody was going to stop me. Yeah. So it was all the things I strung together in order to make that happen.
That's amazing. Is there any last words, message, anything you want to promote as we close this out?
No, nothing to promote. It's just so nice to see you and reconnect with you. Yeah. I love what you're doing, and I do hope people reach out, because I would love to connect and help others.
Thank you for being part of it, because like you affect so many, not just in your work, the work that you do, but your words are going to impact people. They're going to read it, they're going to listen to it, and even if you move one person into change, that person is going to reflect and change other people. And we've left this world better than we found it. So that's why we're doing this.